So welcome back, everyone. We're talking with John Even right now, and he has been on my show now several times. He is an attorney. He's an estate planning and business attorney. 2021 Best Lawyers in America. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Carol. Glad to be here.
So I want you to talk a little bit about yourself first, and then I want to talk about some of your taglines and why they are so important to you.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I've been practicing here in Arizona since 1992. I focus in three areas primarily: estate planning, probate, and business planning. One of my taglines is, I create the legal documents you need to leave the legacy you want. And what it means basically is any kind of legacy that you want to pass on to your kids, to your favorite charity, to whoever it is you want to leave it to. I can help you create those documents to accomplish that. The other one is I always give my clients, or try to give my clients, an even better legal experience.
Even better.
Even better. Now, kind of ties into my name there.
Yeah.
So anyway, that one's basically my commitment to quality. I want to make sure that you, as my client, have the best possible legal experience, and that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm giving you excellent legal documents and excellent legal service.
Any others before we go on that? No.
I think
Okay,
that's
so
good.
what I want to do is go into you and what makes you a little bit different, okay? You do specialize in people. Obviously, you'll do estate planning for anybody, right?
That's correct.
But there are people that own businesses that they need to have an attorney, right? And very important when you specialize in somebody is even with their out of state, they might live out of state but do business here. You specialize with them too as well.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, whether primarily the businesses are Arizona businesses that I deal with, and Arizona people that live here if I'm doing estate planning documents. But it reminds me that there's a lot of people who maybe have their mom, maybe they grew up here, maybe mom and dad are still here, and mom and dad pass away, and they need help from a probate attorney, even though they live in Texas or California or somewhere else. I can help them with their needs to try to figure out exactly how do we work through this probate process.
Well, probate, let's talk a little bit about it, okay? First of all, explain what it is. Not everybody understands it.
Sure. Probate is basically a process that you go through to administer a will or an estate after someone passes away. It's a court process. You have to file certain paperwork with the court. It does require some expertise. It is possible to do it by yourself, but I usually recommend having an attorney help you walk through that process, because for the most time, people have not been through that process before, and it's a little confusing.
Well, I'll tell you what. So if you don't have your estate planning in order, you're going to end up needing an attorney anyway, right? Because if you don't, and you can't really do it on your own, it's really hard to do, and it's really not the time that you really want to be doing that. You want to focus on, your feelings, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a terrible loss when you're usually going through, and in the midst of that, you're trying to deal with all the financial aspects of things, and how do you consolidate assets and liquidate them and make the distributions, and how do you follow mom and dad's will, the way they drafted it, and what kind of requirements are you supposed to do as far as giving notices, and what about creditors? There's a lot of different pieces of it. I've been doing it since 1995, for probate work, and have helped hundreds of people through that process.
Well, here's the thing, what I know. And I'm going to tell a story, because I don't know if I have ever before. I'm going to do it with you now. So my dad had everything done, right? And he thought it was perfect and all done. No, it was not. And that's the problem about things. People need to make sure that they're done right. Things change. Do you do second opinions at all with people?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And I want people to understand, if it can happen to me, and I got hurt out of it. I hate to say this, but unfortunately money changes people, right? And it's not a lot of money. It's not about that. But unfortunately, any kind of money, people get a little greedy. And unfortunately, when you think you might have things done right, they may not be. You might want to have them dust off, take a look at them. Even if you haven't done, have it done with somebody who's a pro at this, like you. It isn't a good idea to just, if you have nothing, maybe you go up online, but most people have a little something, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What happens is, a lot of people, once they get a will done, they kind of put it on the shelf and they forget about it, and maybe 15 or 20 years go by. And a lot happens in 15 or 20 years. A lot happens in your life. A lot happens legally too. And some of those documents are totally different than they used to be, or they have totally different language regarding laws that didn't even used to be around when you did the will before. So it's important to keep those up to date. I usually recommend about every 3 to 5 years that someone comes in and have those updated or reviewed. If somebody else did the documents, I review documents all the time as part of my initial consultation, and that's fine. But just make sure they're up to date. Make sure that they're the documents that you've worked hard your whole life to create, and your state that you've worked so hard to build, that those are going to be protected by good documents.
I'll tell you something, if my dad only knew, he's rolling over in his grave, I'm telling you right now. And it's not something it's not necessary. And we do put our heads in the sands with this for some reason. I don't know why, but you shouldn't. Give them a call. When you work with people, your consultation with them, what's that look like?
That initial consultation, and there's different, depending on what you need. Obviously, if we're talking about a will or a trust or something like that, usually I have people fill out a questionnaire ahead of time. I send it to them. They bring it with them. If they have current documents, I have them bring the current documents so I can review those as well. That initial meeting lasts generally about 45 minutes to an hour. We talk about kind of what their wishes are, what they want to have in their documents. We talk a little bit about what their assets are and how they want to leave those. And at the end of that, usually we come up with exactly what the plan is and what the cost would be to do that.
Now, his phone number is 602-277-7000. You can check him out at johneven, like evensteven.com. You can also check him out on LinkedIn as well. He's there, and you can check him out. You work statewide, even though your offices are right here, you can work statewide.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, go ahead.
No, I mean, our offices are in Central Phoenix, but I handle Arizona matters all over the state.
Right. Now, I want to talk about assets because you mentioned it a few times. Do they, all of them, have to go into probate?
That's a great question. You know, a lot of people think, well, I can just put this asset into probate and not this asset. But if you go into probate, then all of your assets that are titled in your name only, or the decedent's name only, the person that passed away, those have to go through the probate process. So you can't kind of carve out and say, well, this one isn't going to go through probate. There's a little caveat, though. The caveat is some assets I'm going to call are non-probate assets. That means they never go through probate. And let me tell you a little bit about what those assets are. Joint tenancy assets, like joint tenancy with the right of survivorship. Those will pass automatically outside of the probate process. Any kind of life insurance or IRA or something like that, that has a beneficiary. The beneficiary avoids probate. It goes directly to that person. So those kind of things you just need to know. There's also something called a payable on death or a transfer on death designation that you can put with a bank account or an investment account. Those can avoid probate too.
This is why people need to have that consultation with you and make sure that they're all up to snuff and all of your wishes are out there on paper, especially now in the world that we live in. I mean, there's things that are double authors. I don't know. You have to security double now, right? You can't call anybody without them sending you a code to tell you. So honestly, these reasons to make sure that everything is up to snuff and taken care of on paper before anything happens, God forbid, right? Before you pass, it's going to happen. Everyone does. At least you have peace of mind, right?
Yeah. And that's the biggest thing. When people walk out of my office after they've signed the documents, the biggest thing that they walk out of is with peace of mind. And they know it's done right. They know it's done by someone who knows what they're doing, has been doing it a long time, and they have confidence that, okay, at least I know, until we review it again in another 3 to 5 years. It's not just a one-time shot.
Right.
That everything is in good shape.
And it's good that he's telling you every 3 to 5 years, because sometimes people do this and you walk away, and like you said, 15 years later, and then the paperwork's documents are only good documents if they're done right. Right?
Correct.
And they're up to snuff. Let me ask you a question here real quickly before we go to a break. How long does probate take in Arizona?
Generally in Arizona, probate takes about 6 months to a year. And that's assuming a couple things. And that's just for a typical probate. If you have a difficult situation with some difficult people involved, maybe some of the siblings don't get along or something like that, that can often last longer. If there's a difficult asset to sell, maybe you have a piece of property. I went up in Cottonwood. We've had a probate going on for several years because they can't sell a piece of property. Then that's another thing. So it depends on the situation, but generally speaking, 6 months to a year.
Well, we're going to go to a break, and when we kind of come back, we're going to find out how to avoid all of this. The number is 602-277-7000. Are you okay?
Yeah, that was good.
Okay, so we're going to keep on talking here. The one question that I have to ask you, because I know you're going to be using it, you want to take that and just kind of push that over there, just so that it's not in your, yeah.
Okay,
yeah, 'cause
okay.
I'm kind of advertising that. So,
Okay.
anyway, question to ask you. Are you okay that I told that story first? That I was like saying that, because it's true. It's true that happened.
Yeah, that's fine, no problem.
Yeah.
So, and it happens a lot. I mean, and that's the thing people don't know. What happens a lot of time, the reason people come into my office, is because they've had a bad experience. Either mom or dad didn't set it up properly to begin with, and they thought they had, and so there was just a mess, or there was somebody else helped them walk through the process and didn't know what they were doing, or they ended up in court and they really shouldn't have. Or it was just, then they say, I want to avoid all that.
Do you want to say that when we get back on
Yeah,
there?
sure. I mean, that's fine.
Because I think it's
that's how
important.
people, usually say, okay, and sometimes people try to do it themselves, and it doesn't work out so well. And, like a do-it-yourself will or do-it-yourself, probate process. And they say, okay, I need to go to somebody this time. I'm not gonna make that same mistake twice.
And if you own a business, even more so,
Yeah.
because there's too many, talking about assets right there, there's just too many variables.
Well, I definitely want you to ask me a question on the air.
Which is what?
About what assets typically cause someone to go through a probate.
I just asked you that.
Okay.
I asked you, do all of my assets need to? Is that the same thing or no?
Well, the key assets that cause somebody to go through a probate are generally a house.
Oh,
Okay.
here we go. Here it is. It's
A
over here.
business.
Okay.
House and a business.
We'll start off with that.
Okay, and
Perfect
then the
timing.
third one is if somebody doesn't fill out the beneficiary form correctly.
We'll start off with that.
That's because I get asked that question a lot.
Okay. This is you. Welcome back. Well, we just heard John Even's ad, and we are talking with John Even right here in the studio. And we've been talking a little bit about probate. And at the break, we were talking about a little bit of what some of the things that people need to know. What most likely will cause a probate, and you want to talk about that. So, explain that to everybody.
Sure. Well, I wrote an article about it one time about what assets cause you to go through a probate. So if you have something in your estate, what's going to cause it to go through that probate process? The biggest one is a house. If you have a house that has over $100,000 in equity and it's only in the person's name who passed away, that's going to cause you to go through a probate. The second one is a business. If you have a business interest that it's over $75,000 for that business interest, and most businesses that have been going on a little while are going to be worth more than $75,000, that's going to cause you to go through a probate. The third thing is if somebody doesn't fill out a beneficiary form correctly. Either they forget to do it, or maybe the primary beneficiary passes away and they didn't have a contingent beneficiary. The default is the estate. And if the default is the estate, what does that mean? That means you most likely are going to go through a probate if that's over $75,000. So those are the three big things that I have people, when on the planning side, look out for. We've got to make sure those things are covered so you can avoid a probate, because a probate is going to generally be a lot more expensive to deal with, and there's several reasons why I have people say, hey, you can avoid this, so let's try to avoid it.
It's all about avoiding this problem, and it could be a very big problem and a lot of an unnecessary tension for you as well. I also wanted to say something that you had mentioned before when we were on a break too, is why people come to you. Why is it that you say a lot of people come to you for certain reasons?
Sure, and the people come to me primarily after they've had a bad experience, and maybe the bad experience was when their parents did their will that they thought was everything was bulletproof and was going to work fine. It doesn't work out so well, and maybe they hadn't had it updated in 20 years, and then they realize what a mess it was, or they try to do the probate process themselves, because they had another family member who passed away, and they didn't. It was the first time they've ever done it, so they didn't know how to do it. And it took forever, and they ended up costing them a lot of time and energy. Or they had a situation where they didn't give the right notices, somebody complained, it ended up in court, costing everybody a lot more money. And those are the types of things where people say, okay, I'm not doing that again by myself. I'm gonna go to somebody who knows what they're doing. I've helped over hundreds of people through this process, and I can help them get through it too.
Well, let me ask you this. Who is the person, the representative, the personal representative, and what do they do? Who do you pick for that?
Well, the personal representative is just Arizona's word for executor. Okay, so most people know what an executor is. That's just kind of the person in charge after you pass away. The person in charge is first of all, they're gonna find the will. They're gonna make sure they're following the terms of the will. They're gonna collect all the bills, make sure those get paid. They're going to collect all the assets, and they're going to sell them. They're going to sell the house. They're going to sell the car, consolidate everything into one account or into a few accounts, and then they're going to make the distributions. Okay, so it's a pretty key person, and that has to do all those things. They need to be able to kind of handle administrative things like that. They need to be able to work with realtors or work with people when they're selling a car. Deal with all kinds of investment type decisions, so it needs to be somebody who has that skill set.
When someone is thinking about who to do, because they have different, you might have a few children, right? Some children might not be somebody that you would want to do that, or may not be capable, right? There's also children that are special needs children that you might have a child like that. Do you help with that?
Absolutely. And choosing the right person for the job of personal representative is very important. And sometimes it's not one of your kids. I mean, sometimes.
I wish it wasn't one of my dad's kids. I'll tell you right now. Go ahead.
Well, and sometimes because of the dynamics or because of the skill sets or various reasons, nobody in the family is a good choice, and there are actually other people that can step in that role and do that. But you asked about special needs. And certainly a special needs child would not be someone who should be the personal representative. But oftentimes after mom or dad pass away, if they have a special needs child, there's something called a special needs trust that needs to be set up to take care of that child so that their needs can be taken care of, but they don't foul up their government benefits, their governmental benefits. Because that's with someone who has special needs, that's a key issue.
Well, when you do this free consultation, you talk to them about all of these things. You walk them through. You help them. You've got to get down to the nitty gritty. And everybody's got a story. I'm sure that it starts off with that.
It's all about the story. I mean, and every family has a story. And you need to know, first of all, who's part of the family, who are the players, what are the dynamics in the family. And I ask them pretty, straightforward questions. Does everybody get along? Is there any issues I should know about?
But they say, oh, yes.
Well, once we get into it a little bit more, I think they realize, hey, these documents need to work for your family. So we need to make sure that everything is kind of on the table so we know exactly what we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. And most of the time, people understand that, and then they disclose all that. In fact, it's hard for me if someone doesn't disclose all that information to really give them the documents they need to create the legacy they want.
Now, the phone number to call is 602-277-7000. His website is johneven.com. You can also check him out on LinkedIn. He does work statewide. You can call him and have a consultation with him. If you have not done or looked at your plans, your estate planning documents in a while, have him dust it off and take a look at them again. Have him look at them because he does do second opinions. So important, I think, that people do it. And I like that you make sure that they do them at least every 3 to 5 years. So to avoid it, first of all, what is the first thing that we should do, obviously, to avoid it?
Well, I mean, that's the biggest mistake people make, I think, is they don't avoid it. Probate is not the end of the world in Arizona. It's not as bad as California, but it still is a lot more costly, a lot more expensive than it would be if you avoided it. So how can you avoid it? And the biggest thing for most clients to avoid it is a revocable living trust. Now that's not for everybody, but for 80 or 90% of the folks that I'm dealing with, that's going to be the best way for them to avoid a probate. If you're not, if you're in that 10 to 20% that a revocable living trust maybe isn't a good fit, there's a couple other things we can do to try to avoid it too. But you need to do some planning. It's not just going to happen if you don't come see somebody. Avoiding a probate is probably the biggest thing I can do in terms of helping somebody plan for their future, because it does save them on time, saves them on court costs, and also public filings, and it saves them on attorney's fees. It's just a lot easier process to deal with if you're outside the probate process.
Now, phone number to call. He'll do a consultation for you. It's 602-277-7000. The website is johneven.com. The common mistake. You say the number one common mistake is obviously not doing it.
Right.
And we do. We put our heads in the sand. And if you own a business, even more, I want to ask you, what about people who are divorced? Mm-hmm. Now that also changes that dynamic. What is that like? Because we have it's prevalent, right?
No, it is, and I've had several clients that I did a joint plan for husband and wife, and then they get divorced, and after the divorce, they obviously need to redo their plan, because most of the time, people list their spouse as the first choice for being the personal representative, and everything goes to their spouse if something happened to them, and in an event of a divorce, obviously that's changed. So what happens in that event is I will. Usually I need to get their consent to represent both of them, and even to represent one going forward. But on occasion, I will continue to represent one or both going forward with their new plan. And then they're just, instead of doing a joint plan where they both come in together, I'm just doing it for one of them.
So business owners, because you do specialize in business owners, you do obviously for anybody, but if you own a business, even more so. That you should make sure that you have these things taken care of. God forbid something happens to you. Even within your own business, with business partners, that's a mess right there.
Yeah, and there's a whole, we've talked about it in another show, but there's a whole bunch of planning that needs to be done for business owners, that separate from just your typical will or trust or powers of attorney and things like that. The biggest thing is, what happens if something happened to one of the business owners, and who's going to run the business? Who's going to own the business at that point? Is there the ability for the people who are still surviving to buy out the estate, of the interest of the person who passed away? And all that can be handled through something called a buy-sell agreement, or in a couple different ways depending on the situation. But if you're a business owner, that's because remember we talked about what are the key assets that cause you to go through a probate, and a business interest is one of them. So,
right.
So business owners definitely need to be thinking about that.
And better off to have an attorney help you with, especially if you own a business. I think attorneys should be involved in every one of them. Every time somebody has an estate plan and after somebody passes away, I think that the attorney should step in and be the beneficiary. That way that would cause less problems. Myself, that's just what I think. But I do think that it's important that you do make sure that you speak to somebody experienced, such as John. My question to you, going back to your taglines, I want you to talk again about them because they mean a lot to you.
Well, they do. They've kind of developed over time, but there's two different taglines I have. One is, I create the legal documents you need to leave the legacy you want. And think about what legacy means. It means a lot of different things to different people. But if you want to really accomplish that legacy, you need to put some planning and thought into it. And it not only has to be in your head, but you have to write it down and have a good document to do that. And the second one is the experience, because people want to deal with somebody that they like, they trust, that knows what they're doing. And the second, and I always strive to give all of my clients an even better legal experience.
Give him a call. That phone number is 602-277-7000. He works statewide, and his website is johneven.com.